The head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, stated publicly and officially that Russia does not plan to sign a peace agreement on Ukraine until the leaders of key countries in Europe are replaced. He also added that there are already clear signs that European NATO countries are preparing an attack on Russia, and that in Lithuania, a staging ground for a future attack has even been prepared. In fact, Sergei Lavrov played into the conflict between European leaders and United States President Donald Trump regarding Greenland and the Peace Council. The Kremlin is deliberately fueling the idea that supposedly not only Russians can't come to an agreement with Europeans, but neither can Donald Trump, and therefore the whole problem lies with the Europeans. The Russian foreign minister compared Russia's annexation of Crimea to the situation between Greenland and the United States, claiming they're the same. This could legitimize Russia's seizure of Crimea. However, Lavrov also claimed Greenland isn't part of Denmark. But the most striking thing is Lavrov's admission that there will be no peace in Ukraine in the near future. And the Kremlin is insanely happy that Donald Trump, with his antics, has distracted the world's attention from how Russia is terroristically destroying Ukraine's energy sector. And Trump has really lost it, because he cancelled the signing of the deal with Ukraine and the meeting with Zelensky in Davos. But in the end, Lavrov still admitted that the Americans deceived the Kremlin again and did not release the Russians who were on the seized Mariner tanker. My name is Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this video, leave any comment under this episode, and friends, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pecci News. The link to it is in the description of this video. We publish breaking news as it comes in. So, the head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, stated directly today that Russia is not able to sign a peace agreement on Ukraine, and Europeans are to blame for this. Lavrov stated that Russia is supposedly open to dialogue with the current European leaders, but he understands that it is unlikely they will be able to agree on anything. Here is his quote: "If someone wants to talk, we will never refuse. Even though we perfectly understand, let me make this reservation, that with the current leaders of Europe, it is unlikely we will be able to agree on anything. To those who want to have a serious conversation with us, I advise not to talk about it loudly and then proudly look around at the audience. If there is genuine interest, you should just call, as diplomats customarily do, without accusations." Let me add a small remark here. Seryoshka Lavrov. Among diplomats, it's customary not to lie, but back in February 2022, you blatantly lied about Russia not planning to attack Ukraine. So, Seryoshka, horseface, you're not the one to talk about what's customary among diplomats. You're just a horse. Let's leave it at that. By the way, speaking of the war, Lavrov stated that the West's goal of inflicting a strategic defeat on Russia supposedly remains unchanged and continues to exist in the minds and plans of Europe. According to him, there are no longer any rules on the international stage. In the Kremlin's view, the world has shifted to the formula, might makes right. Lavrov claims that it is the West, not the so-called savage Russians, that has completely disregarded the established norms of international relations. Let me remind you that in December 2021 it was that bald jerk. Vladimir Putin stated that it is necessary to change the security architecture of Russia in Europe, to change NATO, to change the world order, and so on. Now Lavrov claims the Europeans disregarded established international relations norms. And separately, the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry mentioned United States President Donald Trump, calling his approach to shaping the rules of conduct in the world a shock for Europe. According to Lavrov, Washington's very desire to dictate the rules on its own caused shock among its European allies. Quote, "If the West wants to talk among themselves based on their own rules, that's their right. Russia will speak based on the principles of balance and equality." Listen, I almost teared up at this quote from Lavrov. Lavrov, whose boss is Putin, is basically a thug from a St. Petersburg alley who speaks publicly in slang, who says there's no war and that Russians need some action, so that's why the war starts. That's the quote. And Lavrov says the West talks by their own rules, while they supposedly will be reasonable and speak based on the principles of equality. It's just a circus, really. In the end, Lavrov directly accused the North Atlantic Alliance of preparing for war with the Russian Federation, stating that NATO is getting ready for a direct confrontation with Russia. And then Lavrov was asked how he would comment on Lithuania's intention to create a fortified area near the Suwalki corridor. And Lavrov responded, quote, "There is a natural feeling in Russia and Belarus that the Lithuanian authorities are up to something, that they are planning some kind of provocation in order to provoke us into a specific action and then call for unity from the European Union and the North Atlantic Alliance using the same kind of threats." Well, then Lavrov moved on to Greenland, and here Lavrov is directly trying to play on the disagreements between the United States and Europe. But before that, Lavrov compared Greenland and Crimea. Lavrov stated, and I quote, "Imagine the people of Crimea as the Greenlandic people, and many things will likely become clear. Let me clarify, Greenland has its own people and is a distinct nation with a unique ethnic group, Inuit. People of Crimea, what kind of definition is that? What does people of Crimea mean? People of Kiev, people of Moscow, what kind of division is that?" So, according to Lavrov, in Crimea, quote, "People went to a referendum after an unconstitutional coup, while in Greenland no one staged any coups. As President Trump stated, this territory is vital to United States security. Crimea is as important to Russia as Greenland is to the United States. It was expected that Russia would start drawing parallels." There's really nothing to comment on here, although Lavrov contradicts himself, and then he goes on to say, quote, "Trump said that this territory is needed for the security of the United States. Let me remind you, he said that for Russia, Crimea is the same." Here's the quote. "This framing doesn't align with the principles approved by the United Nations General Assembly. Let's continue." Lavrov called Trump's claim that Russia and China plan to seize Greenland a lie. "There is no evidence to support the theory that this territory will be seized by Russia or China. We proceed from the fact that we are not involved in this issue. We are observing. Certainly this is a serious geopolitical situation, and Moscow will draw conclusions based on how this problem is resolved." Well, then Lavrov still stuck his nose in and stated that actually Greenland is not Danish territory but a colony that needs to be urgently liberated. And then Lavrov admitted that his press drunkard Mashka Zakharova simply lied to Russia. Who would have thought, right? Lavrov stated that Washington ignored Moscow's request to release 2 Russians along with the Mariner tanker, which was seized by American military 2 weeks ago. According to him, the Americans supposedly promised to release the Russians the next morning, but did not do so, quote. But unfortunately, the following days showed that this decision was not carried out. We expect our American colleagues to fulfill the promises that were given to us. And the whole irony is that on January 9, the press alcoholic of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Mashka Zakharova, publicly stated that as soon as the Kremlin demanded, she said they demanded the release of Russians from the Mariner tanker. The White House even apologized and promised to immediately release the crew members of the Mariner. Also, as Zakharova stated, the Russian side began, quote, "urgent practical work on all issues related to ensuring the prompt return of Russian sailors home." But, as it turned out, the Americans weren't even planning to release anyone, and Zakharova simply lied once again, that's all. Lavrov says, yes, she lied, so what? You're Russians, why are you surprised? Lavrov also said United States tanker seizures violate the International Convention on the Law of the Sea and are concerning. Well, forgetting that it was promised, a wild country launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine. And now Trump wants to create a council of peace with these people, which I talked about in the previous episode. So go to the channel and make sure to watch it. If you haven't done so yet, I'll leave it at that for now. Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, hit the bell, and like the video, friends. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the link or details in the description of this video. I would be grateful to you for that. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.